Hello, my name is James Conrad, and it's my pleasure to be your instructor for this 70-297 exam pack. Now, a lot of the things we'll be looking at in this exam series are going to really collect upon information that I've already taught in previous exam packs. That's not because it's a prerequisite necessarily to this exam pack. You don't have to run out and buy all the other ones in order to get caught up on this one. However, you should have an equivalent level of knowledge. This is a more advanced topic, and really it doesn't teach everything from scratch per se like I have in other exam packs because it assumes that you already have a pretty good level of knowledge by the time you get to this exam pack. The real objective of this exam is so that you can collect all that information that you have amassed in the months past and put it to some practical use in designing an actual infrastructure. Now, there is one thing that we'll talk about a little bit more from scratch, and that is NT4 upgrades, because none of the other exam packs in the stated exam objectives for Microsoft anyway really say anything about NT4 upgrades. So we'll be taking a look at that. There are some requirements for that. You'll need to know that you got the correct hardware, that DNS is in place in advance before you try to upgrade to Windows Server 2003 for your domains. We'll be looking at upgrade methods that you can use, whether you can use a script or whether you have to do everything manually, and all those kinds of things related to NT4. Another thing you'll need to understand in 70-297 exam pack is the migration issue. You need to be able to migrate user accounts, computer accounts, group accounts, and the purpose for doing that is so you can collapse, for example, one domain into another. Maybe you've got too many Windows Server 2003 domains and you want to collapse all of the accounts from the other domains into a single one. Well, you can use tools like the Active Directory Migration tool to be able to do that. Very powerful tool and greatly improved from the Windows 2000 version of that same tool. We also have a critical understanding of domain and forest network infrastructure. Understanding these Active Directory infrastructures will be critical in designing your infrastructure properly. If you design the domain infrastructure or the forest infrastructure incorrectly, then that can be a bad foundation for designing the whole rest of the network, and it could seriously affect whether or not you come up with a good design. This is probably the single most critical issue in designing an Active Directory or network infrastructure. Another thing to critically understand is the global catalog, because it could potentially be quite large, and you need to really keep track of that in terms of the network utilization it requires for replication. If you can't replicate the global catalog because it's too large or too exhausting on your network bandwidth, you might be able to use another alternative known as Universal Group Membership Caching, and it's very handy to use where you've got a slow or oversubscribed WAN link. We'll also take a look at DNS, which of course again is critical to Active Directory. And not only will we look at what the requirements are for DNS in order to install Active Directory, including what you need for bind servers, which is a Unix version of DNS, but we'll also look at where you should put the DNS servers, what kind of zones you should put on those DNS servers, what stub zones would be useful, where you'd want to use conditional forwarding, where you'd want to substitute different root hints and things of this nature. And then we'll also take a look at WINS, which again is not something that's been covered in previous nuggets because it's not been explicitly stated as a requirement for any of the other exam objectives we've taken a look at. So we'll look at that in a little bit more detail here for this 70-297. Fortunately, Microsoft has done a great job with WINS for Windows Server 2003. And it's not prone to some of the potential problems that it has had in the past. Although we would still like to get rid of it entirely and go to all DNS, but that may not happen for a long time. We'll also take a look at DHCP and review some of those issues, and we'll particularly look at design issues in terms of redundancy for DHCP, and we'll also take a look at RAS as well as IAS. And IAS is Internet Authentication Server, which is a critical way of large enterprises consolidating their authentication and their logging into a central structure. And then finally, we'll conclude with some case studies. And this may be the most valuable part of this whole series because, again, some of this stuff will be review, although, again, I'll give you the slant on it that relates specifically to the 297. But the case studies are just going to be mental exercises that are going to help us to think through the kind of scenarios that you're going to run into. What kind of NT4 scenarios you might have where you have multiple domains, where you might need to collapse some of those into fewer Windows Server 2003 domains. Or where you're going to have more dependence upon DNS and you need to come up with a smart design for your DNS infrastructure. We'll also take a look at things such as the network bandwidth and how that's going to affect things such as DNS zone transfers, Active Directory replication, and all those kinds of things. And the case studies, which are the last 4 videos of this whole series, will really, I think, go a long way in helping to just kind of train your mind into thinking the way you need to think in order to come up with effective Active Directory or network infrastructure designs. Now let me also point out the case studies don't address every single technology that might potentially appear in this whole 70-297 series. Again, they're more mental exercises, but I do try to include things that people commonly get wrong in their design structure. Again, with those case studies, there's a download that you can get from www.nuggetlab.com. You'll need to download those case studies in advance and read through them before you get to the case studies portion of this video series. Well, once again, I'm really pleased to be with you on this journey through the 70-297. I'll be honest with you, this 70-297 information can be complicated, and we're getting into stuff where with the MCSC certification, you're really going to earn that MCSC because this can be quite difficult in places. But I'll ease the pain for you with this, hopefully anyway, and we're going to have a lot of fun with this together. So let's go ahead and get started with your first video for the 70-297 exam pack.